A waitress should remember one thing. Victoria Sterling said loudly enough for every guest in the ballroom to hear. People like you carry trays. You do not belong in conversations with people who own the building. A ripple of uneasy laughter drifted across the crystal-lit hall as Emily Carter lowered her eyes and quietly stepped back, balancing a silver tray with steady hands. No one defended her. Not while Victoria, the elegant fiancée of billionaire Ethan Harrison, stood smiling beneath the chandeliers as though she had simply corrected a minor mistake instead of stripping another human being of her dignity. Ethan glanced up from a discussion with investors just long enough to notice Emily apologizing. It looked ordinary. Another employee making another small mistake during another glamorous charity gala. He returned to the conversation without a second thought. Emily did the same. She whispered, "I'm sorry," even though she wasn't sure what she had done wrong. Across the room, 6-year-old Noah Carter sat quietly in a chair beside the staff entrance with a coloring book resting on his knees. His babysitter had canceled an hour before the event, leaving Emily with no choice except to ask the restaurant manager for permission to keep her son hidden behind the service corridor. Noah had promised to stay out of sight. He had also promised to be brave. Still, his small fingers tightened around a blue crayon as he watched strangers laugh, while his mother pretended nothing had happened. Something about Victoria's smile made him uncomfortable, though he couldn't explain why. Minutes later, the evening moved on as if humiliation had become part of the entertainment. Champagne glasses clinked. A jazz quartet filled the ballroom with soft piano and saxophone. Ethan stepped onto the stage to thank donors whose generosity would fund children's education programs across New York. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Emily slipped silently between tables, refilling water glasses before anyone needed to ask. Every movement was careful. Every smile looked practiced. Yet Victoria's eyes followed her everywhere, never with appreciation, only quiet irritation. It was as though Emily's very presence offended her. Noah noticed something else. Every time Ethan turned away, Victoria's expression changed. The polished charm vanished. Her face became colder, sharper, almost impatient. Then, the instant Ethan looked back, warmth returned as naturally as sunlight breaking through clouds. Noah blinked. Had he imagined it? He watched again. The same transformation happened twice within a minute. His stomach tightened in a way children often recognize before adults do. He slowly closed his coloring book and stood, unnoticed among the busy staff. As the orchestra began another song, he wandered a few careful steps down the hallway beside the ballroom, following distant voices that seemed to belong to his mother and Victoria. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop. He only wanted to make sure his mom was okay. Before he reached the corner, the voices suddenly stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the music outside. Noah's heart began to pound as he stared at the hallway ahead, wondering why his mother had gone completely quiet. Noah remained perfectly still, his small sneakers frozen against the polished marble floor as he listened to the silence on the other side of the corner. He expected to hear his mother laugh softly the way she always did when difficult customers tested her patience. Instead, he heard Emily's calm voice. "I will take care of it right away, Miss Sterling." There was no anger in her words, only quiet restraint. A second later, Victoria answered with a voice so different from the one she used in the ballroom that Noah barely recognized it. "You should be grateful you are even allowed to work here. Remember where you belong." Noah slowly leaned forward just enough to peek around the corner. Emily stood beside a service cart, carefully gathering fresh linen napkins that had somehow ended up scattered across the floor. Victoria adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist without offering a hand to help. Her expression remained perfectly composed, but there was satisfaction in her eyes that made Noah's chest feel strangely tight. Before he could understand what he was seeing, footsteps echoed from the ballroom. Victoria instantly smiled. "We cannot have guests waiting," she said sweetly. "Please hurry." The moment Ethan's business partner appeared nearby, she transformed into the gracious hostess everyone admired. Noah watched in disbelief. It was like watching two completely different people share the same face. Emily quietly finished collecting the napkins, straightened the serving cart, and returned to work without a single complaint. She never looked toward the ballroom stage. She never searched for sympathy. She simply carried another tray and disappeared into the crowd. Noah slipped back into his chair before anyone noticed he had wandered away. His heart continued beating faster than usual. He had seen adults become angry before. He had even seen customers speak rudely to restaurant staff. But something about this felt different. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was hidden. That frightened him more than shouting ever could. Several minutes later, Emily found him exactly where she had left him. She knelt beside him with the same gentle smile she always wore. "Are you doing okay, buddy?" she asked softly. Noah studied her face. She looked tired. There was a faint redness around her eyes that had not been there before, but she smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. He wanted to ask why Miss Sterling sounded so different in the hallway. He wanted to ask why his mother kept saying sorry when she had done nothing wrong. Instead, he simply nodded. Emily brushed a strand of blonde hair away from his forehead. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "Then we will go home, order pizza, and watch that space movie you like." Noah forced a smile because he knew she wanted him to feel safe. As Emily stood to leave, he noticed something tucked beneath the serving towels on her cart. It was an older cell phone with a cracked corner, one she almost never used anymore. She glanced at it for only a second before quickly covering it again and pushing the cart toward the ballroom. The expression on her face changed for the briefest moment. It was not fear. It was concern, as though she suddenly remembered something important. Noah followed the cart with his eyes until it disappeared into the sea of guests. Then he looked toward the ballroom entrance where Ethan Harrison was shaking hands with donors beneath bright television lights, completely unaware that only a few yards away, a story was unfolding that no amount of wealth could keep hidden forever. The charity auction began exactly at 8 o'clock. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of guests as waiters moved gracefully between white linen tables carrying silver trays filled with sparkling water and carefully prepared appetizers. Ethan Harrison stood at the center of the ballroom beside Victoria, thanking donors whose contributions would provide scholarships for children across the state. Every camera followed him. Every smile seemed genuine. From where he stood, the evening appeared flawless. That illusion had taken years to build. Ethan believed that success depended on discipline, reputation, and surrounding himself with people he trusted completely. Victoria had always seemed to embody those values. She organized charitable events with remarkable precision, remembered every important guest by name, and treated board members with effortless charm. Whenever managers praised her attention to detail, Ethan simply nodded. He never imagined there was another version of her hidden behind the ballroom doors. As another round of applause echoed through the hall, his chief financial officer stepped beside him. "Everything is running perfectly," the executive whispered. Ethan smiled briefly before answering. "That is because Victoria notices every detail before anyone else does." Standing only a few feet away, Victoria accepted the compliment with elegant humility. "It is always a team effort," she replied warmly. Several employees overheard the exchange. Emily happened to be refilling water glasses nearby. She lowered her eyes and quietly continued working without reacting. Ethan noticed her only long enough to appreciate how efficiently she served the guests. To him, she was simply another dependable member of the banquet staff. Nothing more. Meanwhile, Noah remained seated near the service entrance, but he could not stop watching the adults around him. He saw how every employee straightened their posture whenever Victoria approached. Conversations became shorter. Smiles looked forced. Even experienced servers seemed relieved after she walked away. Noah was too young to understand office politics, yet he understood fear when he saw it. He remembered the hallway only minutes earlier and wondered why everyone behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. His curiosity grew stronger with every passing minute. Back inside the ballroom, Ethan finished another interview with a local television reporter. Before the cameras moved away, Victoria gently adjusted his tie and smiled as though they shared a perfect future together. The audience admired the moment. Several guests even applauded the affectionate gesture. Ethan thanked her with genuine appreciation. He had built companies worth billions by trusting his judgment, and that confidence extended to the woman standing beside him. Doubt never entered his mind. As the music resumed, Emily crossed the ballroom carrying fresh coffee toward a table of elderly donors. One gentleman thanked her for remembering that he preferred decaffeinated coffee. Emily smiled with quiet kindness. The simple exchange lasted only a few seconds, but Ethan happened to notice it while greeting another guest. "She seems thoughtful," he remarked casually to Victoria. The warmth instantly faded from Victoria's eyes before returning almost too quickly to notice. Some employees become too comfortable when guests praise them, she said with a polite laugh. I will make sure standards remain high. Ethan accepted the explanation without question. He turned back toward the next group of donors, unaware that Noah had heard every word from across the room. The little boy looked from Victoria to his mother, then back to Ethan again. For the first time that evening, he began wondering whether the man everyone admired truly knew the woman he was about to marry. The ballroom glowed with polished elegance, but beyond the double-service doors the atmosphere changed completely. The music became distant, replaced by the soft hum of refrigerators, the rolling wheels of supply carts, and hurried footsteps across the tiled floor. Emily pushed her cart into the preparation area, carefully checking each coffee cup before returning to the guests. She breathed slowly, determined to keep her hands steady. She had learned long ago that composure was sometimes the only shield a person could afford. Before she reached the exit, Victoria stepped into the narrow hallway and quietly closed the door behind her. The cheerful smile that had charmed the donors disappeared without a trace. You certainly enjoyed the attention from Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice calm enough that anyone passing nearby would have mistaken it for an ordinary conversation. Emily looked genuinely confused. I was only serving coffee. Victoria folded her arms. Then perhaps you should remember that serving coffee is exactly why you are here. Wealthy men notice kindness. Do not mistake that for admiration. Emily lowered her eyes, choosing her words carefully. I have never crossed any professional boundary. Victoria took one slow step closer, maintaining perfect composure. Good. Because I decide who works at Harrison Grand Events. One complaint from me, and every luxury hotel in this city will quietly stop calling your name. The threat was delivered so softly that it sounded almost polite. Emily swallowed before answering. I understand. For a brief moment, neither woman spoke. Only the distant clinking of dishes echoed through the corridor. Victoria reached toward the serving cart and lightly adjusted one of the folded napkins, creating the appearance of helping. You should smile more when guests are watching, she said. It makes everyone forget where you really belong. Then she opened the ballroom door and immediately greeted a passing donor with effortless warmth. Good evening, Senator. Thank you so much for joining us. The transformation happened so naturally that anyone seeing only those few seconds would have believed she was the kindest woman in the building. Emily waited until Victoria disappeared before releasing the breath she had been holding. She checked the coffee service once more, even though nothing needed checking. Her hands were trembling ever so slightly now. She quietly reached beneath the towels and touched the old cell phone hidden on the lower shelf of the cart, as though reassuring herself that it was still there. Then she pushed the cart back toward the ballroom with the same gentle expression she always wore. None of the guests noticed anything unusual, but Noah had wandered from his chair again after seeing his mother disappear into the hallway. This time he stayed farther back, hidden behind a tall decorative plant near the service entrance. He could not hear every word, but he heard enough. He saw his mother's shoulders become smaller. He saw Victoria smiling 1 second and turning cold the next. Most of all, he saw his mother apologize again even though she had done nothing wrong. Something inside the little boy shifted. He no longer believed this was simply how adults talk to each other. He looked toward the stage where Ethan was thanking another group of generous donors for believing in fairness, opportunity, and compassion. The applause filled the ballroom once again. Noah stared at the billionaire for several long seconds, gripping the edge of his coloring book until the paper bent beneath his fingers. Then he made a quiet decision. If the man on that stage truly believed the words he was speaking, someone needed to tell him what was happening only a few yards away. Noah waited until the applause grew loud again before leaving the service entrance. His small legs carried him carefully between crowded tables, weaving past servers and elegantly dressed guests who barely noticed the quiet child moving through the ballroom. He had never spoken to a billionaire before. He had never spoken into television cameras or stood beneath glittering chandeliers. But every step reminded him of his mother's smile, the one she forced whenever she wanted him to believe everything was all right. It no longer fooled him. Across the room, Ethan had just finished thanking another group of donors when he felt a gentle tug on the sleeve of his tailored jacket. Looking down, He found a blonde-haired boy staring back with unusually serious blue eyes. "Excuse me, sir," Noah whispered. Ethan smiled automatically, assuming the child had become separated from his family. "Are you looking for your parents?" Noah shook his head. "My mommy is working." Ethan glanced toward the banquet staff. "Then I am sure one of the managers can help you find her." Noah remained where he was. His fingers tightened around the edge of his coloring book before he quietly said, "I already know where she is." Ethan noticed something in the boy's voice that made him pause. There was no panic, no childish excitement, only quiet determination. Around them, conversations continued without interruption. Cameras focused elsewhere. No one paid attention to the brief exchange. "What is your name?" Ethan asked. "Noah Carter." Ethan nodded kindly. "Well, Noah, what can I do for you?" The little boy hesitated. He looked over his shoulder toward the service hallway as though making sure no one had followed him. Then he stepped one pace closer and lowered his voice even more. "Please do not be mad at my mommy." Ethan frowned slightly. "Why would I be angry with her?" Noah swallowed hard. "Because she does not tell people when someone is mean to her." The words landed strangely. Ethan glanced toward the ballroom entrance where Victoria was laughing warmly with several guests. "Has someone upset your mother?" he asked. Noah looked directly into Ethan's eyes. Children often lacked polished language, but they rarely lacked honesty. "Your lady hurts my mommy when nobody is watching." Ethan blinked, uncertain he had heard correctly. "Victoria?" Noah nodded. "She talks different when you leave. Mommy always says sorry even when she did not do anything." Ethan instinctively looked toward Victoria again. She was thanking volunteers with her usual graceful smile. Nothing about her appearance suggested cruelty. Everything about her reflected generosity and refinement. His first instinct was to dismiss the comment as a misunderstanding born from a child's imagination. Even so, Noah's expression refused to fit that explanation. The boy was not asking for attention. He was not crying. He simply looked worried. Before Ethan could respond, Noah slowly held out the old cracked cell phone he had quietly taken from beneath the towels on his mother's service card while she had been helping another table. "I think my mommy forgot this," he whispered. "But I heard it make little sounds before. Maybe it has what you need to know." Ethan accepted the phone almost absent-mindedly. The screen was dark, its protective case worn from years of use. It looked like an ordinary, outdated device that hardly belonged in a ballroom filled with luxury watches and designer gowns. Yet as Ethan turned it over in his hand, the screen suddenly illuminated with a notification that displayed only a single unfinished video file and a timestamp from earlier that same evening. His heartbeat slowed as he stared at the glowing screen, wondering why Emily Carter would have recorded anything at all. Ethan quietly slipped the old phone into the inside pocket of his suit, just as another photographer asked him to smile for a group picture. Years of leading boardrooms had taught him one valuable lesson: never reach a conclusion before gathering every fact. He thanked the guests, shook a few more hands, and excused himself with the calm confidence everyone expected from him. No one noticed that his attention had shifted completely away from the gala. As he entered a private conference room overlooking the ballroom, he locked the door behind him and placed the worn phone on the polished walnut table. It looked strangely out of place beside his custom laptop and the expensive watch resting on his wrist. The battery was almost empty. The screen required no password. Ethan hesitated for only a second before opening the unfinished video file. The recording began with several seconds of shaky movement, as though the phone had been placed beneath folded towels inside a service cart. Nothing happened at first except the distant sounds of dishes and footsteps. Then two familiar voices entered the frame. Emily appeared first, arranging coffee cups with her usual quiet focus. Victoria stepped into view a moment later. Ethan instinctively leaned closer. The woman on the screen was still smiling, but the warmth he knew so well vanished the instant she glanced toward the empty hallway. "You should remember who gives you work," Victoria said evenly. "Guests may compliment you, but do not mistake kindness for equality." Emily lowered her head. "I have never tried to disrespect anyone." Victoria answered with a faint laugh that Ethan had never heard before. "Good. Because if I decide you no longer belong here, every luxury property connected to Harrison Hospitality will quietly stop calling you." No interview. No recommendation. Just silence. Ethan stared without blinking. Emily did not argue. She did not accuse. She simply whispered, I understand. The recording ended abruptly as the phone shifted beneath the towels. Ethan remained motionless for several long seconds. It was not only the words that unsettled him. It was the complete difference in Victoria's voice. She sounded controlled, deliberate, almost rehearsed. Nothing about the exchange resembled the compassionate woman standing outside greeting donors. He immediately opened the gallery. There were several older clips, each lasting less than a minute. None had dramatic titles, only dates stretching back over several weeks. Ethan selected another recording. This one showed the employee hallway on a different evening. Victoria's voice could be heard reminding Emily that grateful employees did not ask questions. Another clip captured Emily quietly apologizing for something the video itself never revealed. A third ended with Victoria warning her that powerful people always believed other powerful people first. Ethan slowly closed the gallery without playing another file. His chest felt unexpectedly heavy. Could every recording have been taken out of context? Possibly. Could someone have manipulated the situation? Also possible. Yet one fact refused to leave his mind. Emily had never shown him these recordings. She had never complained to human resources. She had never approached management. The evidence had reached him only because a little boy believed adults should know the truth. Ethan looked through the conference room window toward the ballroom below. Victoria stood beneath the chandeliers laughing beside respected community leaders while Emily quietly refilled coffee cups only a few yards away. From above, they appeared to exist in completely different worlds. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket, pressed a discreet button on his own phone, and sent a single message to the hotel's director of security. It contained only one sentence. Please preserve every hallway camera recording from tonight before anything is automatically deleted. Do not tell anyone I asked. The security director responded in less than 2 minutes. The recordings have been secured, Mr. Harrison. Ethan read the message once before slipping his phone back into his pocket. His expression remained calm as he returned to the ballroom, but something had changed behind his steady gray eyes. For the first time all evening, he was no longer observing the event as its host. He was observing the people inside it. Victoria noticed him approaching and immediately smiled. Everything is ready for the scholarship announcement, she said, gently touching his arm. The guests are excited. Ethan returned a polite smile that revealed nothing. Excellent, he replied. Before we continue, I would like to check one small detail with the operations team. Victoria looked mildly surprised. Ethan almost never questioned her planning. Of course, she answered smoothly. I can handle it if you would rather stay with the donors. I prefer to see it myself. His tone remained pleasant, leaving no room for argument. Minutes later, Ethan quietly entered the hotel's security office. The room was filled with glowing monitors displaying every corridor, elevator, ballroom entrance, and service hallway throughout the property. The director immediately loaded the requested recordings. Ethan watched without speaking. The first camera showed Emily pushing her serving cart toward the preparation area. A few seconds later, Victoria followed her through the service door. The hallway contained no audio, only silent images. Yet the body language alone told a story Ethan had never imagined. Victoria positioned herself directly between Emily and the exit. Emily stood perfectly still, hands folded in front of her apron, speaking only briefly before lowering her eyes again. Several moments later, Victoria stepped closer. Her gestures remained controlled, elegant even, but unmistakably intimidating. Then came the moment that made Ethan's pulse slow. A hotel employee carrying fresh linens approached from the opposite direction. Instantly, Victoria's posture softened. She smiled warmly, stepped aside, and even adjusted the linens on Emily's cart as though offering assistance. The employee nodded respectfully before continuing down the hallway, completely unaware that the atmosphere had changed only because another witness had appeared. The instant the hallway emptied again, Victoria's expression hardened once more. Ethan asked the director to replay the sequence. Then again, each viewing confirmed the same pattern. It was not a misunderstanding. It was intentional, carefully measured, never loud enough to attract attention, never obvious enough for casual observers to question, just enough to leave Emily isolated while preserving Victoria's flawless public image. Ethan leaned back slowly. How many cameras cover this hallway? He asked quietly. 3, sir, the director answered. Would you like the additional angles? Ethan nodded. The second angle revealed Noah, standing partially hidden behind a decorative plant near the service entrance. The child never interrupted. He simply watched. Ethan suddenly understood why the little boy had spoken with such certainty. He had not invented a story. He had witnessed one. The third angle revealed something Ethan had missed entirely. After Victoria returned to the ballroom smiling, Emily remained alone in the hallway for several seconds. She closed her eyes, steadied herself with one slow breath, gently touched the old phone hidden beneath the towels on her cart, and then walked back to serve the guests with the same quiet professionalism as before. She never looked angry. She never looked defeated. She simply chose to keep working. Ethan remained silent long after the recording ended. Finally, he stood and looked through the security room window toward the ballroom below, where hundreds of guests waited for the evening's biggest announcement. The scholarship presentation would begin in less than 10 minutes. Victoria was already walking toward the stage, believing the night was unfolding exactly as she had planned. Ethan reached into his pocket, felt the weight of Emily's old phone beside his own, and made a decision that would change far more than the remainder of the gala. Ethan stepped onto the stage precisely as the master of ceremonies announced the evening's final presentation. The ballroom erupted into warm applause, and hundreds of guests turned their attention toward the enormous screen suspended above the stage. Victoria joined him with effortless confidence, her smile polished and graceful beneath the bright lights. She reached for his hand as photographers gathered near the front row. Ethan accepted the gesture, but his expression remained unreadable. "Before we announce this year's scholarship recipients," he began, his calm voice filling the ballroom, "I would like to speak about something far more important than generosity." The room gradually became quiet. Donors leaned forward. Television cameras focused on the stage. Victoria glanced toward Ethan with mild curiosity, clearly expecting another heartfelt speech about community service. Instead, Ethan continued, "Every organization is judged not only by how it treats its most influential supporters, but by how it treats the people whose names rarely appear in headlines." Several employees paused where they stood, uncertain why his words suddenly felt directed toward them. Emily happened to be serving coffee near the back of the ballroom. She froze for only a second before quietly lowering the pot onto a nearby station. Noah looked toward the stage, sensing something had changed. Ethan turned toward the audiovisual technician. "Would you please display the next presentation?" Victoria smiled confidently, assuming the scholarship video was about to begin. The giant screen illuminated, but instead of smiling students and charity photographs, a silent security recording appeared. The service hallway came into view. Guests exchanged puzzled glances. Victoria's smile faded almost imperceptibly. The footage showed Emily standing beside her serving cart, while Victoria positioned herself between Emily and the hallway exit. Without audio, every movement became more powerful. Victoria's controlled gestures contrasted sharply with Emily's quiet posture. Then another camera angle appeared, revealing how Victoria's demeanor transformed the instant another employee entered the hallway before changing back again as soon as the witness disappeared. The ballroom fell into complete silence. No whispered conversations. No clinking glasses. Even the musicians lowered their instruments. Victoria stared at the screen in disbelief before turning toward Ethan. "This is completely out of context," she said, forcing a nervous smile. Ethan did not interrupt her. Instead, he calmly removed the old cracked phone from his jacket pocket and held it where everyone could see. After reviewing security footage, he said evenly, "I also reviewed recordings that reached me only because a little boy believed honesty mattered more than fear." Noah instinctively stepped closer to his mother. Emily looked horrified, not because the truth was being revealed, but because she had never intended for any of it to become public. Ethan looked toward her across the ballroom. "Emily," he said gently, "did you ever ask for revenge?" She slowly shook her head. "No, sir." "Did you ever file a complaint with my office?" "No." "Did you ever ask anyone to damage another person's reputation?" Again, she answered quietly, "Never." Ethan nodded once before facing the audience. "That is precisely why I owe her an apology." He stepped down from the stage, crossed the ballroom without hesitation, and stopped in front of Emily rather than waiting for her to approach him. Hundreds of guests watched as one of the most powerful businessmen in the country spoke softly enough that only the nearest tables could hear his first words. I believed appearances instead of character. I should have known better. Emily lowered her eyes, visibly uncomfortable with so much attention. Before she could respond, Victoria took one hurried step forward from the stage, her voice breaking the silence as she desperately tried to stop what was already slipping beyond her control. Victoria stopped only a few feet away, struggling to maintain the composed smile that had always protected her reputation. "Ethan, you are making a terrible mistake," she said carefully. "Those recordings show only a few isolated moments. They do not tell the whole story." The ballroom remained silent as every guest waited for his response. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering. "That is exactly why I reviewed every available camera angle before coming back into this room." His voice never rose. It did not need to. The evidence did not change. Only my understanding did. Victoria searched the faces around her, hoping someone would come to her defense, but no one spoke. The confidence she had worn all evening slowly disappeared beneath the weight of hundreds of quiet eyes. Ethan turned toward the employees gathered near the service entrance. "If anyone here has ever remained silent because they believe their position made their voice less valuable, that silence ends tonight." Several staff members exchanged uncertain glances. Then an older banquet captain, who had worked at Harrison Hospitality for more than 20 years, slowly stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "Miss Carter has always protected everyone else before herself. She never complained, even when many of us knew something was wrong. We were afraid nobody would believe us." One by one, other employees nodded. None spoke with anger. None sought revenge. They simply confirmed what they had quietly witnessed for months. Emily stood motionless, overwhelmed by the attention. She had expected to finish her shift, take Noah home, and leave the evening behind forever. Instead, the truth she had tried so hard to hide was now standing in the center of the grand ballroom. Noah slipped his small hand into hers. She looked down, and for the first time that evening, her carefully practiced smile became real. Ethan knelt so he could look Noah in the eyes. "You were very brave," he said gently. Noah shook his head. "I was just scared for my mommy." Ethan smiled softly. "Sometimes that is what courage looks like." Rising to his feet once more, he faced the audience. "Effective immediately, Harrison Hospitality will establish an independent employee advocacy office that reports directly to me. Every staff member, regardless of position, will have a confidential way to be heard. Respect will no longer depend on a job title. It will be the standard for everyone." Warm applause slowly filled the ballroom, not the enthusiastic applause that had greeted wealthy donors earlier, but something quieter and far more sincere. Ethan then turned to Emily. "If you are willing, I would like to offer you a new role helping us train future managers in employee leadership and workplace dignity. I am not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I am offering it because your character has already demonstrated the values this company should have protected from the beginning." Emily took a slow breath before answering. "I will accept only if every employee receives the same respect, not special treatment for me." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "That is exactly the future I intend to build." As the evening came to an end, guests quietly left the ballroom with fewer conversations about luxury auctions and far more conversations about integrity. Noah looked up at his mother as they walked toward the hotel entrance together. Outside, a gentle spring rain had begun to fall across the city lights. Emily squeezed his hand and smiled. Neither of them had won because someone else had lost. They had simply refused to surrender their dignity. And sometimes the strongest voice in the room is not the loudest one. It is the quiet truth that finally finds someone willing to listen.